Welcome to Rebel Nurse, the podcast that's here to show you just how bold and diverse the world of nursing can be. I'm your host, Erica Browning. Whether you're curious about unique career paths, need a dose of inspiration, or just want to feel seen and celebrated, you're in the right place. So grab a cup of coffee, an energy drink, or whatever keeps you going, and let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Corbin, for coming on the show. Let me introduce you a little bit to everyone, and then we'll just get into it. This is Corbin Stroller, and he is a Cardiac Cath Lab nurse. And as you all know, we're focusing on cardiac nurses because it's the month of February, and it's American Heart Month. And Corbin is a registered nurse. He has his bachelor's degree, but he's going to tell us from the beginning how he got started into nursing. So Corbin, actually, we'll start. Where are you from originally?
I am originally from Ohio, Northwest Ohio, Paulding County. It's 3 counties down from the top far left-hand corner, right on the Indiana state line. So I lived in Ohio and worked in Indiana.
Okay. Is that near Kentucky? Is that up there somewhere?
Kentucky's to the south, all the way to the south.
Oh, my geography's terrible. Okay, so that's where you're from. Where did you go to nursing school?
I went to nursing school at University of St. Francis, which is a small Catholic school, private Catholic school in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay.
Right across the state line from where I lived, and Fort Wayne was a city where we went for shopping, eating out. We spent a lot of time there. That's where I got my first nursing job, and this little school, University of St. Francis, just had a great reputation for nursing. And they put out really good nurses, and so that's where I went.
Okay, so I'm a second degree nurse. I had other bachelor's degrees and other things, and then I went on to do nursing. My little town has Paris Junior College, which also has a nursing program. That's in Northeast Texas. And so you'd think, oh, well, Paris Junior College, like that wouldn't be very competitive. It is very competitive for the area for nursing, because that's what a lot of people want to do. They want to be nurses and they want to stay local in their small towns. So anyway, okay, so what was your first nursing job?
My first nursing job was in the ICU. They called a coronary medical ICU. And how I ended up there, which is probably pretty rare. I think it's less rare these days, but back then you didn't start out in the ICU. But the reason why I started out there was because the first job I got in the hospital when I knew I wanted to be a nurse and go into nursing was in what they called the heart station, which was a telemetry monitor station. So you sit in an office, you've got 2 or 3 monitors in front of you, and you watch the telemetry, you watch heart rhythms. And I think we had 50 to 60 patients at a time. And there was trouble, then you called out to the floor and they addressed the situation. So that was the first job I got in the hospital.
So you're the ones that you send out the little tele boxes and they're going on to what other floor, and then someone somewhere, which was you, is monitoring all of these rhythms. How much artifact did you get just constantly?
Yeah, you always have artifact and you always have alarm going off nonstop. So that concept of alarm fatigue, you have to get really good at, okay, the mistake on the machine versus this is actual VTAC. So I dove in before nursing school, before anything, being trained on heart rhythms and how to read heart rhythms. So it becomes like a second language for somebody that's in that role.
Because I can't tell you how many nurses go in, they find their patient, half the leads are off, and they're like, oh my gosh, and telemetry's calling them, hey, you did go back in a room too, put their leads back on.
It's funny because, we were stuck in an office for 12-hour shifts all day long. Literally, you didn't move from the chair except for a lunch break. You talked about your first degree being outside of nursing. My first degree was in landscape design. So I'm an outdoor guy, I'm an active guy, a physical guy. So you can imagine sitting in an office for 12 hours straight. It was pretty wild. So anytime there was artifact, anytime something went wrong with the leads, I'd be the one going out and troubleshooting the monitors in the room because I just wanted to get out of the office.
How many monitors were you assigned to?
Probably between 50 and 60 patients.
Stop it. How does one even do that?
The systems are good. They're set up to alarm to let you know what's going on. But you just have all these monitors in front of you and you see all the lines and you're just like a hawk. You're just watching every little heartbeat. It's a good system.
Okay. Well, then that was a good entry into cardiac nursing, right?
It was intense training. You learned fast, and we had a lot of good people pouring into us. Cardiologists would come and do classes with us, and we had them on speed dial. If something was weird, we'd give them a call. They'd come talk to us and explain whatever. But I did that for about a year. And then the hospital where I was at, which is still one of the finest health systems I've ever been part of, which may surprise some people in Northeast Indiana. But anyway, they had a student nurse program. And once you were there at the hospital for a year and you started a nursing program, they give you a choice of where you wanted to work. You could pick whatever unit you wanted to be in. And I had been in and out of the ICU, some with the heart monitors and whatnot. And I was fascinated by what was going on in the ICU. And I knew that's where things were intense and that's where I would learn a lot. So I dove right into the student nurse program. I said, I want the ICU. So I was a student nurse and a patient care tech, those two things full time. While I worked full time, I went to spin.
You were busy.
Yeah. So my second daughter was born my first day of clinical. I missed my first day of clinicals because my second daughter was born.
Aw, how many kiddos do you have?
So we have three, two girls and a boy. My oldest is 21, and then Tori's 18, and a son who's 14.
Oh, man. In my mind, you had littles. They're not littles anymore.
Yeah, we got started early. We wanted to have a family early. So I was doing this landscaping on my own, had my own business, and then we got married. And about a year in, the business was getting tough. And it's like that part of the country, it was just a tough way to make a go of it. And so my wife, Katie, and I talked, and it was like, okay, it's time to look at other options, maybe go back to school or whatever. So I worked in a factory kind of to bridge the gap for a little while. And I got to a point where I enjoyed the work, but I went to them and said, listen, I enjoy working here. What opportunity do you have for me in the future? And they're like, for where you're going and your family, they're like, we don't have anything for you, but we'll help you find a direction to go in. So they got me in contact with an industrial psychologist that they used for their company. And this guy would come in and he would counsel you and he would test you, personality testing, and he would help guide you in the right direction, interviews and all this stuff. So after the end of all that, he's like, hey, you should try healthcare. Like, do something in healthcare, be a paramedic, go into nursing, go to med school. I was like, what are you talking about? I had no idea, which was stupid because I should have had an idea. My family was a nursing family. My mom was a nurse. My grandma was a nurse. I had an uncle who worked in the cath lab, had no idea. I mean, I had an idea what he did, but not really. And at that point, I was like, let's give this a shot.
Well, how nice of that company to be like, yeah, we know your future's not here, but let's help you anyway. Usually they're like, 2 weeks, get the heck out of here.
Well, if somebody who knows that their most valuable asset is their employees, and they poured into their employees, and they were really good. It was a great company.
That's so nice. So after that, it's when you applied to nursing school.
After that, I went and got a job straight at a nursing home.
Oh.
If I'm going to do this, I'm going to see if I can do it. I know where the battlefield is, and if I can do a nursing home, I can probably do anything. So I got a job at a nursing home, and believe it or not, I loved it. I really enjoyed work. It was a classy building. It was more like an assisted living, but they had several floors, and they kind of took it pretty far. They had a floor that was more like an Alzheimer's unit, and they did a lot of care. So I worked there, and they did a lot, and I loved the people so much, and I enjoyed it. And it's interesting because I'm a firm believer that like no time is wasted. People that are looking to get into nursing or whatever your career is, a young person, everything that you do, you take along with you, and it goes to build that bigger picture. To this day, I think about that job. You learn how to move with a patient, somebody getting up from a wheelchair, how you position your body so that they can lean against you and they don't fall, how you support people with your knees and your arms, and how you learn all the body mechanics. I use that every day in my bedside nursing, and it's because I learned it in that first job.
Wow. We need more people who enjoy working with that patient population, honestly.
Oh man, if you can do that, that is humbling. You have to have a servant heart to do that job. Isn't that what it's all about? I think it's like you're there to help, you're there to serve. You got to have the skill sets and you got to be the most skilled person, but you have to have that servant heart. I think that's what makes it a really great nurse.
So you go to nursing school, you get started on, I guess, the telemetry unit, or you went straight into ICU, right?
Yeah. So when I got into nursing school, I was in ICU, and I'm telling you, the unit where I worked was really busy. and it was really intense. And they had nurses there working that had been there for 15, 20, 25 years. And these ladies saw me coming from a mile away and they loved it. I was 22, 23, 24 at that time. This is a young, strong guy that could help us move patients. Yes. But they saw that I wanted to learn and that I was hungry, and they poured into me. They just gave it all they had. These ladies were awesome. I could just cry thinking about them, how they brought me up, and they were just lovely. They would be, Corbin, check this out. I've never seen this before. Come help me with this patient. Start this IV, put this catheter in. And before I was even allowed to do those things, they had me doing those things.
That's so great. I was on a post-cardiac surgical unit. I think I told you this, where we took care of some patients after heart transplants or after cabbages or after LVAD placement. They don't have to go to the ICU. If it's a heart institute, they have all of that prepared for them. But so we had that as well. So if they came to us, it was things were not going well. You had nurses on there, to go back to what you were saying, in there, they were 20, 30 years. They knew everything. And I remember being so stressed. They knew what to do and they helped you. I had a good experience in that floor where the nurses helped me.
Yeah, those kind of people, like, they don't have to do that. And we've probably worked also with those nurses who don't care one bit to pour into you, but they made that conscious decision to pass on their knowledge, and they were excited about it. And we had a great time, and they made fun of me, and we had such a great time. And then they hired me right after nursing school. Hit the ground running, had already been in the action for a couple of years. And I knew the people, I knew the patients. And then as a new nurse, they were giving me the most critical patients, the toughest patients, the learning patients, and they were just supporting me. And it was really great.
We introduced you as a nurse who works in the Cardiac Cath Lab. So you eventually moved on from there. What was your next move?
So student nurse 2 years, and then I worked a solid 3 years in the ICU. And it's a unit where you can get burnout fast. And they were always talking about, you got to take it easy. Don't overdo it, because you're dealing with life and death every day, and a lot of deaths. I was doing a lot of end-of-life care, patients who were in a long-term facility, ventilated. I was getting into a lot of that, a lot of really intense situations. Of course, everybody is. That's the name of the game in that unit. But I'll go ahead and tell a story about a situation that it was like a time when I knew, okay, now it's time to move on. I had a patient who was on a ventilator, and his family was in the room. And this is after long hours, end of my 3 shifts, whatever. I've been with this patient a long time. And the intensivist doctor came in, and he told me out in the hallway, I'm going to do a breathing trial, which is, you kick them off the ventilator and you see how they do on their own.
Right.
So this guy walked in the room. He didn't say a word to the family. He just went over there. He kicked off the ventilator, and he just watched the patient struggle for what I thought was a really long time. And I mean, the patient wasn't doing well. The alarms were going off. The patient was struggling. It was just really rough. And the family was sitting there with these wide eyes. They didn't know what was going on. He didn't say a word to them. And then pretty soon he just kicked the ventilator back on and he walked out of the room. I had just had it. I stayed calm. I talked to the family and said, listen, guys, this is what was going on. This is what happened. It's okay. We needed to see how well your dad can do on his own, and explain. And they were crying. They just didn't get it.
How shocking for them.
I walked out of that room and I was so upset, and I was so angry at the doctor for doing that. And I just went straight into his office and I'm like, listen, that was ridiculous. You shouldn't have done that. You could have explained it better. These people are so upset. You can't do that. And I just had the talk with him, and I never did that. I always minded my own business. I didn't talk to a doctor like that, whatever. But that day I'd had enough, and he just looked at me and he goes, so do I need to go out and do damage control? And I was just like, oh my word. You know what? Never mind. Taken care of.
I did it for you.
Yeah. I don't want to get into negative things or whatever, but for me, that was something that pushed me over the edge. Like, okay, let's consider something else. That day, a guy came up from the cath lab and he's like, hey, we've got some openings. You want to try?
That day?
That same day. And I was like, sure. You know what? Let's try something else. And so I got an interview. I think I was interviewed the next day, and I had a job right away because they knew me.
They snap you up. They know what you know, and they're like, oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah. So that was that. Then after that, I went to the cath lab, and really that was my first taste. Well, in the ICU, you do a lot of bedside procedures. So I knew procedural stuff, but that was my first real procedural nursing, to where instead of being with one patient for 12 hours a day, you're just with one patient quickly. You're very focused on that one patient, and it's very focused, very in and out, get through the procedures of the day. So it's just a totally different kind of nursing, which really fit well. Very technical, very hands-on, very fast-paced. And I enjoyed that.
Did they put you through any sort of orientation?
I'm trying to remember. It was a lot of on the job, just being on orientation with somebody for a long time.
Right.
And then, yes, you do but I'd already been through all the critical care classes. In the ICU, you really have that long, I don't even remember, like 16 weeks or how long my orientation was. It was a long time. They really teach you a lot in the ICU. It really flowed well into cath lab. But I did work at this particular hospital. A lot of their procedures, they didn't use an anesthesia provider for. They had one of the procedure nurses was at the head of the bed, and their main job was conscious sedation and monitoring the patient, just like an anesthesiologist would do. But I had two 60-ish-year-old gentlemen who oriented me, both ex-military guys, had been doing the job for 20, 25 years. And those guys just taught me the fine details of conscious sedation, monitoring the patient, and then once again, just poured into me to teach me how to do the procedural stuff.
Wow. Here's a question. A cardiac cath lab shift, is that 12 hours?
It depends on the lab. A lot of times it's going to be a 10-hour shift or even 8-hour shifts. There are some labs that do 12s. It just depends on the lab. And then as soon as you jump into cath lab, instantly you're talking call time. That's the big topic.
Like being on call?
Being on call. Because now, you think about it, if somebody's having an MI, they're coming in and you go straight to cath lab. So cath lab, you have to have a team on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Okay.
So there's always one team on call at all times. And then, of course, during the day, depending on the hospital, there may be 3 or 4 labs. So you've got 3 or 4 teams going during the day, and then one call team at night after hours.
I see. Do they schedule procedures on holidays, or are you just on call?
Just a call team. So not usually scheduled procedures on the holiday.
Right. You're waiting for that MI that came through the ER sort of scenario.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when you're on call, are you at the hospital?
Nope. Don't need to be at the hospital. You need to be able to get there. It's usually a 30-minute window.
Okay.
So if you can't get to the hospital in 30 minutes, you don't get the job.
Oh, I see. Like when you're interviewing, like this is our window.
When I was interviewed the first time, right away, she's like, are you within the 30-minute drive? It takes me about 35 minutes to get to work. She's like, all right, well, have you ever heard of the electrophysiology lab? And I was like, don't really know what that is. In their EP lab, which is all the heart rhythm stuff. So pacemakers, defibrillators, implants, and then also all ablations, cardiac rhythm related, everything related to heart rhythm. That's what they're dealing with in the EP lab. Something totally different than the plumbing. So cath lab's the plumbers, EP lab's the electricians, right?
Okay. Actually, the gal that I'm interviewing after you right here at 4, she's an EP lab nurse. So it's perfect. She's the electrician, you're the plumber. Okay.
So because of that, I couldn't be there in 30 minutes. They put me in the EP lab right away, but then they also cross-trained me for cath lab. So during the day, they may switch me to cath lab. I did a lot of cath lab procedures and EP. I went back and forth. Some people didn't care to do that because it's a lot different work. And once you get into EP, it's a rabbit hole. People like to stay in there. It's very more methodical. Procedures are longer. They're more technical, I guess I would put it. So some people can't stand EP because they feel like it's super boring. You're watching a lot of signals crossing the screen. It's very deep. It's very intellectual to where cath lab, it's also those things, but it's more like, hey, there's a blockage. We're going to fix it. Fix the plumbing.
Okay. So here's a question. What are examples of procedures that you do in the cath lab?
Basically, you're getting in there and you're opening up blockages. We're putting in stents. We're using angiography where you're ballooning narrowings to get things opened up. You're improving that blood flow that's going back to the heart muscle. And then there's also structural things they do in the cath lab, heart valves. Some cath labs get into angiography in the legs. So they're working in arteries in the legs. It just depends. But mostly in the cath lab, you're thinking opening up the coronary arteries. You're getting better flow to your coronary arteries.
Okay. And so when you're in there, you said there's another procedural nurse and then like the conscious sedation nurse. Do y'all switch back and forth? You take turns? How do you do it?
Yeah, usually you take turns going back and forth, but it's totally different. And every lab operates a little bit differently. In the first lab where I worked, they rotated all the positions, and that included the scrub. So you have, sometimes it's a rad tech and x-ray tech that scrubs in with the doctor, just a surgical tech would do. And he's handing the doctor tools. He's setting up a sterile field. He's scrubbed in sterilely, more like surgery. So the first lab I worked, you rotated between the guy doing the conscious sedation or the nurse charting. And then also you could scrub in with the doctor and be right hands-on in the procedure. So we rotated through those three positions.
Do you have a favorite one?
I love conscious sedation. It's my bread and butter. It's my favorite thing to do. I don't know, just fits me to a T. I really enjoy doing that. But I also love to scrub. If there's any nurses out there that ever have a chance to scrub in and learn sterile technique and how to get hands-on, it's really fun. It's a whole different language, but I really enjoy that too. I really love just administering conscious sedation.
We did conscious sedation in the ER and everyone hated it. And the reason you hated it is because you had three other patients and you had to like quickly hand them off or kind of be who's going to take care of them. Can someone help me with this? Well, you just felt so distracted. And I mean, some places were good about, hey, this is your one-to-one, which I should say all of them are, but you always just felt a little distracted. And then they were like, okay, are you done yet? How about now? Because we got stuff for you to do. So maybe I would like it if I had one patient.
It's a very controlled environment. This is like you're focused on this one patient and you know their history well. You have a really good feel for their medical issues. You have to monitor that you're watching the heart rhythms right there, blood pressure, O2 sats, end-tidal CO2. This patient is terrified, right? Because this is a patient who's going into the scariest place they've ever been in. They're sick. They don't feel good. They're in pain. It's a foreign environment and you're rolling into some procedure. It's scary. And my favorite part about it is like you get to help that patient relax. You get to calm their fear. And it's just really fun to help get them through comfortably some like the scariest situation of their life. And most of the time, by the end of it, they don't even realize the procedure's over. They're like, what do you mean you're done? It's really exciting just to get them through that scary time and see them come out at the other end and just have been very comfortable the whole time.
Well, how many times would y'all have to say, okay, we're cathing them. This is not stentable. This is not angioplastable. He needs a cabbage.
That happens. They do way less bypass surgery now. Like our tools, our technology has gotten so good. You really could get a lot done percutaneously, meaning just with a needle poke into the groin artery and then wires up into the heart. So most of those cath lab patients are leaving with a groin puncture instead of a sternotomy, like their chest cut wide open. We can fix it all, most of it through the cath lab. The way they differentiate that is, let's say you come in and you're having a heart attack. We shoot the first angiography and we see like one blockage or two blockages that are pretty easy to get to. We'll go ahead and fix those. But now you shoot the dye in and you see in the arteries, oh no, now we've got 2 or 3 blockages on the right side of the arteries and 2 blockages on the left side of the arteries. Now you're like, okay, this guy, he's a candidate for bypass. And what you do at that time then is you take that patient off the table and they speak with the surgeon and the cardiologist and they come up with a plan from there. So yes, maybe they go to surgery, or maybe it's a scheduled intervention with the cardiologist where you put in 2 stents this time and then come back later and fix the other side. It depends how critically ill the patient is, but it's a matter of how severe the blockages are and how many of them there are. That's how you determine what you're going to do.
Interesting. Because from the ER perspective, You're like, oh God, chest pain, EKG changes, get him out of here. And then after that, you're like, well, hope it works out. That's as far as you see, which, I mean, it's designed to be that way because you all take over and you're doing your thing. We know intuitively, they might have to go for a cabbage because there's some places, as you know, they'll cath them, but they can't fix it. It's cathing for diagnostics only.
Right. Typically, you're getting a cath first to see the severity, and then those images, now you see the anatomy, that goes to the cardiothoracic surgeon. That way he knows what he's working on and knows what areas need to be bypassed and all of that. I had a really awesome clinical instructor, and she was one of the nurses that I worked with in the ICU. And when I was going through my clinicals, she set me up with the best observation experience ever, and it changed me from then on. But she set me up to watch a bypass surgery. And so I went into the hospital early in the morning, went into the men's locker room and was changing into scrubs. And I see a guy over there changing and getting ready. I'm like, I think that's the surgeon. I'm pretty sure that's the surgeon that I'm going to go be with. And it was. So I was like, okay, I see that guy. He's just a regular guy. He puts his pants on one leg at a time, just like me. Cool. So after that, I went straight to the pre-op area and I got to meet the patient who was going to have bypass surgery because it was an outpatient bypass surgery. So I got to meet him, introduced myself, told him I'll be in there observing the surgery. We talked a little bit while the nurse was getting him ready. And then when they got him ready, I got to go walk in with him to the operating room. I got to watch them put him to sleep. The anesthesiologist was fantastic. He had me standing right at the head of the bed with him. I got to watch them get access, put him on the bypass machine. I got to watch them open his chest up. I got to watch them as his heart stopped as the bypass machine takes over. And the surgeon was talking me through everything the whole time. He was so good. His name was Dr. Ladowski. And he talked me through the whole thing while he was working. And he explained everything he was doing and even asked me questions. He's like, okay, I'm a red blood cell. Explain everywhere I'm going to go, all the way through the body. Tell me what structures I'm going to go through in order. We talked through it, all about the circulation. And that was a 6-hour, I think it was a quadruple bypass. So they bypassed 4 blockages. But this guy, literally, I saw him step back and take a break one time. He stepped back. He kind of shrugged his shoulders and stretched them a little bit and then went right back to work. And that was in 6 hours.
Wow. Man, I don't think I could do it.
It's all about the training. The guy's a regular guy. He's intelligent. He's brilliant. And he just has been through the training. He's done the work. He's done the study. And it's just a matter of putting in the work. You do have to have a certain skill set to start out with. But then after this surgery, I remember seeing the heart for the first time when they opened up this guy's chest, watching it beat. And I was just blown away because the motion of that heart, it's like pretty violent. It's a muscle and it just gives this thump, thump. It's pretty hardcore when you see that thing working. And then I remember them, like, they get access, they put the hoses in the right places, but then they put this cold fluid in, and it's a calcium solution. I forget what they call it, but it slows the heart down to the point it stops. And when it stops, then the machine takes over, and that's putting the blood circulation through. It's taking the place of the heart. But I remember that heart stopping. And then I remember them working on it. And then after the surgery, they reversed the process. And I remember that heart just sitting there. And then all of a sudden, it just starts beating again on its own. And it's just crazy to watch that happen. It was a miracle.
So for the nurses out there that are listening to this and they're like, this sounds amazing. Do they need ICU experience? Will med-surg experience do? Do you need any experience? What do you need?
So for Cath Lab, I don't know how things are currently. It seems like the standards have gone down in a lot of areas just because we're so desperate for nurses, and that's very scary. But historically, you need ICU experience before you go to Cath Lab. And I think it's a great idea because we would have been exposed to all of the vasoactive drips. You understand the hemodynamics. You're used to heart rhythms. You're used to blood pressures. You're used to codes. You're used to the defibrillator is like a second nature to you. It's like your best friend. So you need to have that knowledge before you go to the Cath Lab. There's going to be a night when you're on call and you're the only nurse on call. So you've got 2 rad techs and you, a 3-person team. And you're going to go running into the ED in the middle of the night, and you're going to take that patient that's having the heart attack, and you're the only nurse there. You need to know the drips, you need to know the heart rhythms, and all of those things. So yeah, I would say for a new nurse, the best thing to do is get into a unit that's going to have a great orientation. Be thinking, I want to soak in as much as I can. I want to learn as much as I can. Med-surg is a great place to start because you get such a wide variety of patients. But man, if you can get into an ICU as soon as possible, I would highly recommend it because you're just going to get that much exposure. That would be my recommendation.
Right. Because so even if they don't say, oh, you have to have ICU experience, you would be like, I suggest you at least be very familiar with drips because we have nurses that go from the ER. I was in the ER. I went to the ICU because I wanted to become more comfortable with the drips because in the ER, you start them and goodbye. And depending on what ER you're in, some drips you don't start at all. You're going to have a few that you start and then it's goodbye. And I wanted to go to the ICU. You have all sorts of drips and you're managing them the entire time. And so for me, it made me feel more comfortable. And if you're saying, hey, you might be the only nurse on there, you should probably know about the drip.
Even during the day, if you're getting those ICU patients that come to you, they may have 2 IV pulls with a dozen IV pumps, and they're all going. They're all running their sedation, their pain medicine, there's pressors, and then the patient's on a ventilator. And somebody who's never been exposed to that, it's going to be very intimidating. I'm saying that, and I've trained some really great med-surg nurses to work in the cath lab, and they've done a great job, but it was a painful process. Like they're scared, they're intimidated. They'll get through it. We'll get you through it. If you have a good trainer, a good preceptor, you can teach anything. You can learn anything. But why not learn it in the ICU?
So quick question for the nurses who are like, okay, I'm interested. I've got the experience or I'm going to get it. Is it 3 shifts a week and then plus 1 on-call shift that you have to promise? Like, how does it work?
Totally different everywhere you go. The lab where I worked last, they did 8-hour shifts. So they were there every day, 8 hours. And then they did 1 to 2 nights a week. You were on call. And then maybe every 3rd to 4th weekend, you were on call for the weekend. I've seen labs where you're on call every other weekend. That's pretty intense.
And you were telling me you're a travel nurse now. So there are travel opportunities for cath lab nurses as well. Is that true?
Oh yeah, lots of them. The more specialized you get and the more experience you need to do the job, the better the pay is. There's a lot of cath lab jobs out there for travel nurses for sure.
Corbin, thank you so much. I loved your stories. I saw one open heart surgery. I think they were replacing a valve. Mine is not as cool as yours because I got on the step. I mean, they let me right in there. I remember to this day as Dr. Lowry, I started getting lightheaded with my head down. And it's not because of what I saw. I think I was hyperventilating or something. And I felt myself start to pass out. So I had to step off the step and like walk back, sit down in this OR room. And it's not nearly as cool as your story.
I love it. I went through bypass surgery. I went through a lot of different procedures, working in the ICU. The only time I ever felt lightheaded like that, like exactly what I'm talking about, was for when I observed a C-section. That just about took me out.
And why? It's not like you're afraid of blood and guts. It's just whatever.
It was something about how they were tugging on that belly. Like, I can't do it. But, I want to finish my story with the bypass surgery. It was cool because after that surgery, I got to follow the patient to the ICU for recovery. And I was working with the ICU nurses there who were watching the outputs of the drains and all of these things. But by the end of that day, I got that patient up out of bed and he took steps. So I watched the whole thing from start to finish, from locker room to locker room. I got to watch that process and I never forgot it. But I watched that patient get up and walk at the end of the day. And then I went to the locker room afterwards to change. And when I sat down to change, Dr. Ladowski was right there. When I sat down by him and he talked to me like it was his son sitting there. He said, "You did a great job today. That was a great case. We talked about the patient. We talked about the surgery. He asked me about my plans for the future. He gave me some advice. And he was like, have a great career. I enjoyed the day. Thanks for coming." This guy was amazing. He took the time and it made a huge impression on a young man that was starting his career. And it was never the same since. And I've loved the heart ever since that day. And I've been involved with cardiac nursing since then. So it was really special.
Well, it's really a testament to interacting with someone who has a teacher's heart, where they just actually care about you as a person. Hey, let me help you. And what did it cost him to do that for you? It meant the world for you and, kind of probably impacted the rest of your life. Here we are today still talking about it. And to him, I mean, maybe he remembers it or not. Maybe that's just what he does with everyone. And I really love that.
I've tried to do that. Like, you keep that in mind, how people pour into you. And that nursing student comes in who is like confused and sitting in a corner and doesn't really want to even be there. You just engage and you get them excited and you just take them with you the whole day and you pour into them.
Yeah, it can make all the difference. Well, Corbin, I've got some get to know you questions. I did not have this on the podcast previously, but I think it's so much fun because people, they hear about your stories, but they're like, oh, but who is this person? So if you weren't a nurse, what would you do? Like, you couldn't be a nurse.
I would probably be doing landscaping, something outside, something with plants, something wild and outside. Or I would be, I don't know, racing motorcycles or doing guided motorcycle adventures through the mountains or something like that.
What is your favorite plant to put in landscaping? I need to know. I need to take notes.
I absolutely love olive trees. I love roses, and especially the white roses that you see in California, the gorgeous white bush roses. Those two together, olives and roses. I love rosemary. Rosemary is really common around here, in Southern California. And rosemary has an awesome scent, and you can cook with it. You can pick it out of your landscaping, and it's so fragrant. And if you run around and hike and run around on the hills, you run into sage and rosemary. You hike past it, and it just like sends off this perfume. It's just beautiful.
Yeah. What's a plant you would not, that you hate in landscaping, that has so many roots, it's so unruly? What would you not put in?
Back in the Midwest, they used to have these, they called them yews. It's this big evergreen shrub that they planted around every house in the 50s, and they just overgrew and got huge. I spent half my time digging those things out of there, and I hated them.
You know what I've heard in Southern California? People hate those ficuses because I guess they have a pretty gnarly root system that will upend sidewalks. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, there's a lot of invasive stuff out of there that you don't want to plant around here. In Southern California, it's tough because it's just such a wide variety. It's crazy plant life around here. It's pretty crazy.
Okay, what is your favorite junk food?
Oh, favorite junk food. I'm just going for pizza. Not that it's necessarily junk food, like you get it out of a bag, but I'm just a fanatical about pizza.
What's your favorite kind?
I just like sausage, onion, just any pizza I love.
I haven't even asked if you've traveled. Do you like Chicago pizza, New York pizza?
I like the New York style more, or the wood-fired craft. I'm more into that. I really haven't had a pizza that I didn't like.
It's hard. I've got a pizza in my refrigerator right now. Okay, if you could travel anywhere, where would you go?
I would love to go to Switzerland. I've never been to Europe. I want to go tour Europe, but I am Swiss and German by nationality, and I've never been to Germany or Switzerland. I would love to get up into the mountains, into the Alps one day.
Okay, cool. Well, me too. I just went to Europe for the first time last year. I went to Italy. My life was changed.
I bet it was.
I'm a Roman in my heart, I've decided. Well, Corbin, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I don't even know if you're on social media or if you want these people to reach out to you. You can tell me later if you do, and I'll add it in the notes. And if not, no big deal. But thank you so much for at least sharing your knowledge and your expertise. And now nurses, if they want to pursue it, they know what to do.
Yeah, that's great. Look me up. Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Just look up Corbin Stroller. I'm on there if you would ever want to connect about whatever nursing stuff you want to talk about or questions.
Okay, great.
I really appreciate it. It's been fun. And
well, thank you. And we will talk soon.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you loved what you heard, do me a favor and share it with a fellow nurse who could use a dose of inspiration. And I'd love to hear your favorite takeaway. Post it on Instagram, tag me at ShopRebelNurse, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay a rebel.